Hello everybody, my name is Jane Gerard. I'm the owner of Jane Trains and I'm the founder of Circle Training. This is the concept where we redesign square pens and fencing for dogs in order to facilitate our training. I posted a photo on the Facebook page for Empowered Dog Trainers and got really overwhelmed with the responses, the comments and then the emails. So my apologies, it's taken a little while to get back to everybody. I decided in the end that I would just do this video blog because it's just easier to explain what I'm attempting to do. And so bear with me if English is not your first language and I use terminology that you're not sure about. You can send me an email asking me, explaining it further, and I'll do my best to use terminology that you would know. The circles are using fencing that is not chain link. So although your facility may be inside a perimeter fencing that is made of chain link and probably in squares or rectangles or maybe triangular shape, the actual circle itself needs to be with another fencing material because chain link has unfinished edges that come up and they are jagged and typically they're topped off with a pole. Well, the pole, of course, would be straight, and we don't want a hexagon shape. We do actually really want a circle shape so that there are no corners. In all the 20 years I've been working with dogs, whether it's in shelters, and this is my third facility that I built up from scratch at my dog training and boarding business, although I do less boarding these days, much more training. In all of the facilities I've noticed that by having the dogs in square areas, there is, for me, just a personal observation, greater reactivity rather than if I put them in a circle. And I believe it has something to do with corners. And also the fact that when dogs are born into our societies, generally speaking, in the Western world, generally speaking, they are in contained areas that is square fencing, or pens, unless they're a ranch dog or a farm dog, but even then they're still subjected to fencing of some sort. So I've just noticed, especially in the shelters as well, definitely in the shelters, that the dogs are much more reactive, being held in pens that are either 10 by 10s or 10 by 20s. Measurement is in feet. And so what I started to do was develop from a perspective of being much more humane, was containing dogs in circles. So on this photo here, we've got this chocolate lab that is inside the inner circle. And here's his shade, which is this big tree, and there's a pile of logs that can climb on or sit by. And he's only in here for about an hour anyway. Then I release him through the gate that's on this side, and then he goes into the running track, and the entrance to the running track is a gate on that side. That's another critical point. You want to have your gates at opposite end of the circle. This fencing is a welded wire. This was the second prototype that I built, and I actually don't use this type of fencing anymore. I use the weaved wire, which is a ranch fencing, and you can either get the 4-foot or the 5-foot high. For the shelters and the rescues guys, I would say go ahead and get a 5-foot high fencing. The ranch fencing, which is typically for horses, is semi-rigid. So unlike the chain link, which just collapses unless it has the poles supporting it, this ranch fencing is able to withstand, you can actually change the shape and it can be supported by T-posts. These are these metal posts that you pound into the ground. And they're closer together than you would have in a normal straight fencing. So a normal straight line fencing, there would be a T-post or a wooden structure that would be anywhere from say 10 or 12 feet apart. With these circles, you want to go and have your T-posts a lot closer, anywhere between 4 or 5 feet apart, so that you can actually get that perfect circle, okay? So it's the inner circle, which is the containment area where the dog can decompress, and then the outer circle, the track, where you can do your training. The other reason why I came up with this design is because when I have a lot of clients coming in with really difficult dogs, if the dog is on leash, when I first started training, I think it was before the first front attachment harness came out, So some people would come to me, so this is like 1999, 2000, with choke collars and what have you. I hated the fact that the dogs were getting quite a bit more reactive being on leash. So I was constantly racking my brains to try to think of a way that we didn't always have to have such a heightened aroused, emotional aroused state of the dog before we could even begin training. So I borrowed from my memories of when I used to work with dolphins, and back in the 1990s I designed a new pool area for our dolphins. The president of the park didn't accept it, it was way too expensive, of course. But the idea was that the pools were not pools. Actually, we had the dolphins in a long, continuous canal. That was the idea. That went all the way around the amusement park. And then in the middle, there were these islands that had people sitting on them. So the big canal area went all the way around the one section of the park anyway, and in the middle were the seating that went up. So people would look out onto the dolphins instead of looking down into the dolphins as though they were in a pool. So still using the idea, and that's because I used to watch the dolphins all the time, and they would always be swimming around in a circle. And the dolphins that we had in captivity, this was in France. I worked with in many countries, but the ones that we had in France were the Tursiops truncatus, which is just the bottlenose dolphin. They're a coastal species, and they do live in canal areas, so that's where I borrowed that idea from. So using the same principles of what would be true to the nature of the canine. Well, what do canines like to do? Well, they do like to run, they like to sniff, and they like to play. But they're a dynamic species. They're very active, especially in the first few years of their life. As they get older, then it can slow down a bit. But when people first get a puppy, or a young dog, they're not thinking, oh, what does this puppy, need to have? They're thinking what they would like to have. A dog at their side, companioned by the fire, or going on walks. And of course, the reason why we trainers are all so busy. I mean, for me this year, I've been slammed, but is because a person may have that idea about how they think that their dog should be, and then the reality is that they're really dynamic and they actually need to have more exercise and more training. So this system deals with both of those. You can have in the shelters, and if there's lots of rescue people and shelter people watching this, you can have this set up and have a green handler or a volunteer who doesn't have a lot of dog skill. Tell them just to walk on the outside of the circle, tossing treats every time the dog comes up level with them. The two main techniques that I use with the circle, my circle training concept, is shaping and capturing, and I mark it with my clicker and then toss the treats. I can walk on the outside, and if the dog follows me no matter which way, I can train all different types of behaviors. This one down here, I was just playing with this lab, who was also a rescue, and again, this is the facility that I had before in Alabama. For feral and fear-based dogs, the circle that I have out at my place here in the backyard, I'm actually using a different type of fencing. This time around, I wanted to experiment. These are semi-rigid panels that they're sometimes referred to as livestock panels or pig panels, and they're 16 feet in length, so they're quite long, but the squares are also a bit too large, so I would not recommend them for shelter. But I just eyeballed this particular circle and threw it together just because I wanted to see with the different fencing how that would work. And this actual track on this one is narrower than 3 foot. For the feral dogs, when they come in and I'm working with them, I don't have gates on this one, but I open up one whole side of the panel. So I create a really large opening, and then using a buddy dog and tossing my treats, I'm able to get the feral dog who follows the buddy dog into the circle. And then once they're in the circle, I can actually start creating a relationship with the feral dog. As they move away from me, I move in the opposite direction around the circle, so that they move away. I guess I would be following behind them so they don't feel that I'm trying to trap them. So then they would stop, I would toss about a bunch of treats where I am, they would kind of look at me, either turn and go back the other way, and then I would always move away from them around the circle, but at the same time dropping food everywhere. And session after session after session, the dog starts to understand if they go in the circle, there's lots of really yummy food, and then I'm the person that's delivering them. So I do use distance as one of my main criteria in order to create the behaviors that I'm looking for in the feral dogs, and as well as reactive dogs. So the principles of training are the same, just the same as what you use. It's no different. You know, that's why we're all on this sort of learning curve together. I will say to you, the reason why I changed to using circles rather than squares is from a humane perspective, and also from my business perspective. I can work several dogs at the same time. And so for shelters as well, what I've noticed is that if you have a volunteer come in and they have a really good heart and they just want to walk a dog, and inevitably they pick a dog that might be too strong for them, it's not necessarily going to be a great experience for them, but you can actually set them up with this, and then that way every day you would be guaranteeing that your difficult dogs have a chance to get out into the fresh air and have exercise and enrichment, because you can bury food as well. Okay, you can do treat trails, and then in the inner circle you can bury bones and create sniffing games, whatever you would normally do in a square pen, but now you have it in a circle. And so I use a whistle, which I'm not wearing, but I do use a whistle too as a positive interrupter and or as a bridge, just like a clicker. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to email me. When you receive this video, it will be a link to my YouTube channel, which I think has a huge amount of subscribers. Just kidding. I think there's only 14 people. So I'm not really very technical, so this has been a lot for me to try to upload all of this stuff. And I do have a lot of videos, but I've never uploaded them. And so now that I've received the response, which I never thought I get such a larger response. So now I will do my best to try to upload more videos so that you guys can see what it looks like in action. And again, if you do have any questions, please feel free to email me. And please understand that my reasons for doing this is I'm not trying to do anything new other than just create a more humane way for us to contain our animals and to train them off leash. That's the idea. So thank you very much for your time, and have a great Christmas. Okay, bye.